In 1867, I received a letter from Thomas Niles of Roberts and Company Publishing, an important publishing house in Boston. He asked me to come and see him in his office at 10 o'clock Monday morning. Miss Alcott, I'll come right to the point. We here at Roberts Publishing believe there's an audience for young adult fiction for girls. It's an untapped market and one we believe could be very profitable. We want you to write something. Me? Well, I would like to set young girls on the right path. I consider myself a feminist, but I have no background in that sort of thing. I've been writing bodice rippers like Pauline's Passion and Punishment. I read that. Splendid, full of intrigue and romance. Couldn't put it down. If you can write something like that, surely you can write a page turner for young girls. Mr. Niles, all women are not the same. Yes, but you know, young girls, you're on the staff of a children's magazine. Well, that's just for the money, and I've only been there a month. Miss Alcott, let me be frank. If you need money, I can help you. You're one of the few female writers we know, and we think you have talent. After all, your book, Hospital Sketches, sold well. Don't remind me. I gave away my rights for the princely sum of $40. What would I write about? Something that would appeal to girls between the ages of 12 and 16. You know, parties, romance, shopping. You know the old adage, write what you know. Perhaps you could base it on your family. My family? Oh no, my family would not be a suitable subject for girls. Oh, why not? Well, you see, Mr. Niles, my family is very unusual. I can offer you $1,000 in advance or $200 upfront and 5% of the profits. Well, that's a very generous offer, but my family, no, I cannot write it. Tell me why. Well, you see, Mr. Niles, my family is very unusual. Oh, that could be interesting. No. My father is, well, he's different. That could be a good thing. No, Mr. Niles, it is completely impossible. You don't understand. Even if I were to consent, I doubt my sisters would agree to having their personal lives put on display. Well, that's easily remedied. Simply change their names. Yes, I suppose it might be possible. How many sisters do you have? 3. Who's the oldest? Anna. She's very comely and well behaved. She always does exactly what my father says. She's his pet. He predicts great things for her. Which number are you? 2nd. Born in 1832 on November 29th, my father's birthday. Which sister were you closest to? Lizzie. She was shy and delicate. She played the piano and often provided musical accompaniment to the little shows I wrote. She encouraged me to be an actress or a writer. And who's the youngest? May. She was a bit spoiled being the baby of the family. She wanted to be an artist and would often paint my picture. Sounds like excellent material for a book. Just write the real story and I will help you with any necessary adjustments. All right. God knows I could use the funds. A few months later, I returned to Mr. Niles' office. I've made extensive notes. Would you like to hear them? By all means. Just listen and don't interrupt me. There may be some questionable parts, even shocking. My life is not a sweet little story. Whoa, sounds scandalous. You have no idea. Just hear me out without interruptions. Then you can give me your comments at the end if you like. By all means, go ahead. All right. My parents were Bronson and Abigail May Alcott. I was the black sheep of the family, a tomboy. My mother, who we called Mammy, tried to interest me in the female arts of cooking and sewing, but they held little appeal. Mommy would shake her head and declare I was marching to the beat of a different drummer. But she often praised the little plays I wrote, like this speech from The Witch's Curse. Hither, hither from thy home, airy sprite, I bid thee come, born on roses, raised on dew. Charms and potions canst thou brew. Mammy said it was very well written, and my father agreed with her. From the age of when I was a little girl, I often locked horns with my father. He used to call me a devil because I was always getting into some kind of mischief. He would chide me, Louisa, Louisa, come out of that tree. You're not a cat. Meow. And take off my pants. Do you think you're a boy? He was a schoolmaster at Boston's prestigious Temple School. It was run by Elizabeth Peabody, the sister of Nathaniel Hawthorne's wife. At first, my sisters and I were his students too. We were very popular because other students loved my father. He didn't look like the other teachers with his long sandy hair and twinkling blue eyes and flowing silk scarves. When one of my classmates misbehaved, my father would ask the class to vote on the punishment. Often they would vote to punish my father, and he would allow them to strike him with a ruler. He felt seeing his pain was a powerful lesson. Other teachers read the Bible. We read the Bhagavad Gita, and my father would tell us about his past lives when he was scribe in Egypt in the court of King Tut. One day, he brought a Negro student into the classroom, and Miss Peabody began receiving complaint letters from the parents. She demanded he expel the girl. When he refused, she fired him. Now, my family and I were proud of my father for standing up for his Negro student, although she was expelled anyway, and now he had no job and we had very little food. After that, my sisters and I were taught by our next door neighbor, Henry David Thoreau. He was so sensitive and handsome. He looked like a bust of Julius Caesar I'd once seen a picture of in a book. I must confess, from the age of 10, I had a schoolgirl crush on him, even though he was 15 years my senior. He used to take us into the woods and teach us about the flora and fauna there. When I confided in him that I had dreams of becoming a writer, he said I should go confidently in the direction of my dreams. Do you really think I can become a writer, Mr. Thoreau? He smiled and patted my shoulder. Oh, be still, my heart. When I told my sisters about my dreams of becoming a writer, Anna said it was impossible because I was a girl. She said I should be looking for a husband, but said nobody would want me because I had dirty elbows. She herself had lots of boys flocking around her and was constantly excising those that didn't live up to her exacting standards. At least Lizzie always took up for me. She always told me to never give up. And Father and Mommy agreed with her. My father often told me I could have a career and didn't have to bother looking for a husband. But now that he was dismissed from his position, he had little interest in hearing about my dreams. He was often unable to sleep. I tried to help by writing poems for him, like this one. Little shadows, take me prisoner, hold me tight as I climb and cling and whisper, Father dear, good night, good night. It didn't help. He was up all night. Finally, he went to see his wealthy friend, Ralph Waldo Emerson, who he'd met at the Transcendentalist Society. He begged Emerson to give him the money to go to Europe because he had a possible job opportunity there. Emerson agreed, and soon my father was on a boat to England. Mommy had us write to him every week. Dear Father, we hope you're having a good time in England. We miss you. Mr. Thoreau is teaching us. We can't wait to see you again. Love, Louisa. No answer. We continued our lessons with Mr. Thoreau. I remember the day he took me into the woods and introduced me to a bluebell. He picked it and handed it to me. I pressed it in a book of poems and I kept it as a token of our love. I dreamed of marrying him and living in the woods together. For 6 months, we heard nothing from my father. Mommy tried to keep the family fed, but it was often a struggle. And sometimes she had to ask her wealthy brother for money. Finally, my father returned home. We all waited outside and threw our arms around him when he returned. But he was not alone. He had another man with him. Oh, this is Mr. Charles Lane from the Alcott School in London. Mr. Lane, you will soon see we were a loving family. I don't believe in love, it's selfish. And my father told us that he and Mr. Lane were going to create a utopian community called a consociate family. And Mr. Lane was going to buy a farm where we would all live together and grow only aspiring vegetables. You know, vegetables that grow upward, like tomatoes, and refuse those that grow downward into the dirt, like potatoes. Well, Mommy had heard quite enough. She picked up Mr. Lane's suitcase and headed toward the spare room. My father took Mr. Lane's hand. Abby, put my suitcase there as well. Mommy gasped. She set down Mr. Lane's suitcase and left the room in tears. Mr. Lane insisted on absolute silence when he was napping. My sisters and I used to put on plays and Lizzie would play the piano. But now we resorted to reading books and speaking in a whisper when we played games. One day, May was painting my picture and my hair kept falling into my eyes. So I went into the spare room to find a ribbon to tie it back with. When I opened the door, I saw my father and Mr. Lane lying in each other's arms. My father bolted out of bed. We were just taking a nap. Even though I knew that I I was only 11 years old. I knew there was something wrong. But you weren't sleeping, Father. A few months later, we packed all our belongings into a buckboard and we left civilization forever. We moved to the Fruitlands commune, 10 miles out of town in the middle of nowhere. Mommy took one look at the house and declared it looked like a glorified chicken coop. But my father was in great spirits that day. Ah, isn't it beautiful here? The air is so clean, I can feel my lungs clearing as we speak. No, I want to go home. I miss my friends. Calm down, Louisa. You'll make new friends here. But my father was unable to recruit any members to join his consociate family. So he went to a mental hospital and persuaded them to release some of their patients. There was a man who swore constantly. I would cover my ears and tell him to be quiet, and he would reply, "Go to hell, you little bitch." One communard, Wood Abram, changed his name from Abraham Wood to free himself from social controls. All of the consociate family members were men, except for Anne Page, but she was expelled for eating a fishtail at a neighbor's house. I mean, we were vegetarians after all. Perhaps the biggest problem was Mr. Bauer. One day, May was in the parlor painting a picture, and he walked in completely naked. May screamed, "Ah, put some clothes on." She ran to get my father. My father rushed into the parlor. He threw a shawl at Mr. Bauer, but put some clothes on immediately. Nah, it's too hot. Well, linen clothes, they're cooler and they're made of flax. And also it makes a powerful statement against slavery. As if anyone saw us but a bunch of lunatics. Oh my God, Miss Alcott. Mr. Niles, I told you not to interrupt me. But my father clung to his utopian dream and Mr. Lane. Winter was coming in and the land had not proved arable. My father and Mr. Lane went on a speaking tour and left us to manage things. A crop of barley was turning to seed. We tried to salvage it, but we weren't able to save it all. My father scolded Mommy about that when he came home. I confronted him. "Why weren't you here, Father?" I was pursuing my intellectual ideals. To hell with your intellectual ideals. I was learning a new way of speaking from our consociate family members. For all his flaws, my father did have some good ideas, especially abolishing slavery. One night, my dream came true. Mr. Thoreau appeared at Fruitlands. When I heard his voice, my heart leapt up. Had he come to rescue me? I ran downstairs to greet him. But he was not alone. He had a boy with him who he whispered was an escaped slave. Well, what is he doing here, Mr. Thoreau? He told me that Fruitlands was a stop on the Underground Railroad. But there's no railroad here. He explained it wasn't a real railroad, but a safe place for them to stay to escape slavery. I had been keeping a diary of my life at Fruitland, and I wanted to show it to Mr. Thoreau. If he thought it had promise, I might try to make it into a book. I waited patiently for him to finish his important business with my father. But once he was done, he just left with a tip of his hat in a sweet little wave. I kept writing in my diary for weeks afterwards, hoping he would return. But sadly, that was the only time he ever visited Fruitlands. Many escaped slaves stayed at Fruitlands. It was so exciting. We felt so noble because we were in service of a cause we passionately believed in. Unfortunately, relations between my parents had become strained, to put it mildly. We would have these family meetings where Mommy would sob and beg my father to give Mr. Lane up. And then we would all start crying. But Mr. Lane held the purse strings, and my father clung to his utopian dream and Mr. Lane. Finally, Mommy told my father he would have to choose. The next thing we knew, she borrowed money from her wealthy brother, and we all left Fruitlands forever. My father wouldn't leave, so we went without him. He took to his bed and fell into a deep depression. I was happy to leave Fruitlands because that meant I was again tutored by my dear Mr. Thoreau. My uncle tried to persuade Mommy to divorce my father, but she wouldn't go through with it because she knew we would be outcasts and shunned by society. After several months, my father finally saw the light. I'm sorry, Charles. I shall withdraw my funds. But I thought you wanted to create a utopian society. You've driven me to join the Shakers. They advocate celibacy. So our consociate family came to an end. And then my father was sent to jail for refusing to pay taxes. We had very little food. Mammy had to go to work, but she had few skills, save cooking and looking after children. She took in boarders. One was a girl with severe disabilities. She screamed all night. Anna continued to attract a lot of suitors. I would hear them laughing gaily in the parlor while I was upstairs trying to write. What was her secret? I had boys who were friends, but they never looked at me the same way they looked at Anna. The only place I succeeded with them was on the stage. But I was still hopeful that I would find love. I turned 16 that year. I dreamed of something happening with Mr. Thoreau. He was my champion. He used to tell me that books were the treasured wealth of the world and a fit inheritance of generations and nations. Since he was a writer too, he knew what he was talking about. Once we walked by Walden Pond and I pointed to a fern with a shimmering cobweb on its leaves. Look at that. He leaned in close and whispered, "It's the cheek of a fairy." Oh, it was a magical moment. I moved closer, hoping that he would kiss me. But instead, he walked toward Walden Pond, and he said he would like to live there someday. He's so shy. I offered him a little encouragement by saying I would join him there. He just smiled mysteriously and didn't say anything. Maybe he was thinking it over. But before anything could develop, Mommy had other plans. She combed the papers for a job with a decent wage. Anna got a job teaching school and she gave the money to Mommy, but it wasn't enough. One day, Mommy found a job as a matron at a water cure spa in Maine. She insisted we all come along. At first, we enjoyed frolicking in the pool, and we had plenty to eat and not just vegetables. Mommy was making a good salary, and we got new clothes and even treats sometimes. There was a handsome pool attendant who named Horace who befriended May. It was charming, even though she was only 8 years old. It was clear she was sweet on him. She used to follow him around and help him with his jobs like folding the towels and cleaning the pool. He lived in town, and one day he and May rode bikes by the ocean. Then he invited her back to his house. She met his mother and sister. But then they had to leave on an errand, and Horace asked May if she wanted to see his shell collection. She said yes, and he took her up to his bedroom and opened a box which he said contained the largest collection of snail shells in New England. Then he asked her to sit down. She sat in a chair by his bed. He looked at her strangely. Then he leaned in and whispered, "Take off your underwear." She didn't know what to do. So she complied. Then he lunged at her and put his hand under her skirt. Just then she heard his mother call his name, and she took the opportunity to bolt out of the bedroom and beat a hasty retreat back to the spa. She ran sobbing into Mommy's arms. Of course, Mommy reported Horace, but the management wouldn't do anything because it hadn't happened on their property. So Mommy had no choice. She quit her job, and soon we were on a train back to Massachusetts. Meanwhile, back in Boston, my father kept getting in trouble. He was released from jail, but continued his radical ways. An escaped slave was taken into custody. My father was outraged when he was brought into the courtroom in chains. He vowed to set him free. He joined a vigilance society. One day he was in a mob of 500 men who stormed the courthouse where the slave was being held. The mob stabbed the guard to death. Luckily, there was so many people there, they never found out about my father, and he was never charged. But he was afraid he would be, so he went into hiding and refused to look for work. Years passed, and I regretted never sharing my feelings with Mr. Thoreau. He was no longer my teacher. I had missed my chance. Anna took a teaching job in New Hampshire. I cleaned houses and tutored children. Mammy became a missionary and went into the slums ministering to the poor. Their homes were rife with disease. Mommy got scarlet fever, and we all caught it from her. Gradually, we recovered, except for my little sister, Lizzie. Her scarlet fever turned into rheumatic fever, and it went on for months, and it got worse, despite my father giving her homeopathic remedies. Finally, Mommy insisted on calling a doctor. He told us her heart was weak and she might not last the night. My father suggested, envision her in golden light. Father, you heard what the doctor said. That won't do any good. It will uplift her spirit. Unfortunately, nothing helped. And our dear sweet Lizzie died the next morning. I had lost my best friend. Now there was no one who believed in me. None of this would have happened if it weren't for my father's irresponsible behavior. We had words about it that night. Father, it's your fault. Lizzie is dead. No. She has been freed from suffering. Her spirit has transcended into the ethers. You don't know that. You are responsible. How can you say such a thing? I love my daughter dearly. Well, not daily enough to call a doctor or get a job. I give lectures on philosophy. You killed Lizzie as surely as you'd held a knife to her throat. You and your damn homeopathic remedies. You have stabbed me in the heart with your cruel words. My father collapsed on the floor, sobbing. My dear Mr. Thoreau brought Lizzie's coffin to a mausoleum until my parents could raise the funds to have her interred. He stopped by to drop off the key to the tomb, and when he did, I was fighting back tears. I clung to him. I'll never be happy again. Never, never, never. There, dear Louisa. Have faith. You have your family, your talent. He said I had talent. Maybe he did care. I couldn't be sure, but I took a chance and I gave him a kiss on the lips. He pulled away. Louisa, please. I'm too old. You need someone your own age. I'm 26. Well, I'm in my 40s. I'm an old man. I'm set my ways. I live a solitary life. I care for you. Well, I care for you too. Well then, you deserve someone better. I have no money. But what does that matter when you're in love? Well, I just can't. How stupid of me to assume you were my student and I'm an old bachelor. I'm sorry. Never mind. I pulled away. What a fool I was to think that he cared for me in that way. I'm such a failure with men, always have been, and this time is no different. All those years I wasted thinking he cared. Now I'm an old maid. I resigned myself to my fate, and I just vowed to concentrate on my writing. But I was so lonely. For months I avoided him. I hated myself for thinking he might be interested in me. How could I know I would never see him again? Then tragedy struck. Mr. Thoreau became ill, and he died of tuberculosis. He was just 44 years old. I couldn't eat for days. I spent hours sobbing uncontrollably. I was determined his memory would live on. He would not be forgotten. Such a unique being would never come this way again. I wrote this poem for him. The sign said, "Our pan is dead." His pipe lights mute beside the river. Around it wistful sunbeams quiver. But music's airy voice is fled. Spring came to us in guise forlorn. The bluebird chants a requiem. A willow blossom waits for him. The genius of the woods is gone. Then Anna made things even worse by making an announcement. She was engaged to marry a man she met at the Concord Drama Society. I pretended to be happy, but secretly I hated her for leaving me and for the ease with which she attracted suitors. But before I could recover from all my losses, the Civil War was upon us, and I volunteered to go to Washington, D.C. and nurse the wounded. Unfortunately, I came down with typhoid fever and I barely survived. They gave me mercury, which would cause me health problems for years to come. And they even shaved my head. Slowly, I returned to the land of the living. I did manage to write a book about it called Hospital Sketches. It sold well, but I'd signed a contract with a publisher that was not in my favor, and I ended up with a fraction of the profits. What a fool I was. I promised myself I would never make that mistake again. My family's finances were forever weighing on me. I was 31 years old and I was completely destitute. My sister and the man I loved were dead. My family was penniless and starving, and I had no hair. One night, I walked by the Charles River. I gazed into the water. What if I drowned myself? It would be so easy. Then I could escape all this misery. I stood there for a long time thinking about it. Then I heard Lizzie's voice. Louisa, never give up. I turned around and walked home. I wouldn't end my life. Instead, I would rededicate myself to making money. It was the only way out. Miss Alcott, I am so sorry for all your troubles, but we must keep this book more uplifting, to say nothing of the prurient parts. You need to eliminate them completely. We don't want to upset our young readers with such racy fare. Mr. Niles, I told you that this material would never do for your young female readers. I've been plodding along for months trying to write this sweet little story that you requested, but it's no use. I will start over again from scratch. No, don't be too hasty. There's some good things about it. It has potential. Write about your infatuation with Thoreau. Use his name if you like. The family's poor, make it charming. Give the sisters spunk, which I'm sure you all had to survive. Make your character the protagonist. Focus on her teenage years, engage the readers, make them care about you. But you must eliminate the father from your story entirely. How can you do that? He creates conflict. He was the cause of all our troubles. He's dead. Yes, I must confess many times I've wished for that, but it seems extreme. Well, then have me away. How about setting it in the Civil War and having him be away in the army? I like the sound of that. I know. I'll make all the main characters female. The young girls will love that. And I will make the men play minor roles. Minor roles, Miss Alcott. Yes, it's about time. A few months later, I returned to Mr. Niles' office. Well, here's my first attempt at making the story fiction. I changed the sisters' names and call myself Jo. Excellent. Read it to me. Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents, grumbled Jo, lying on the rug. Oh, it's so dreadful to be poor, sighed May, looking down at her old dress. I don't think it's fair for some girls to have plenty of pretty things and other girls have nothing at all, added little Amy with an injured sniff. We've got mother and father in each other, said Beth contentedly from her corner. The four young faces on which the firelight shone brightened at the cheerful words, but darkened again as Jo said sadly, yeah, well, we haven't got father, and we shan't have him for a long, long time. She didn't say, perhaps never, but each silently added it, thinking of father far away where the fighting was. Oh, that's a good start, Miss Alcott. I'm glad you like it. I think I finally understand what you want me to write. just a sweet little story that will make your young readers feel good. Exactly. Anything else? Yes, write more about Jo. If she has problems, make them lighter, more manageable. Put some romance in the book. The young girls will love that. Might lift my spirits as well. I have a lot of troubles, so I'll write a jolly tale. A few months later, I returned to Mr. Niles' office one more time with my revisions. I complied with your request for romance. I have a boy next door named Laurie who's a love interest for Jo. Jo and Laurie, why confuse our readers with those names? Oh, Laurie's real name is Theodore Lawrence, and Jo is short for Josephine. She's a tomboy. I see. Will they marry? No, that's too predictable. But my young readers will be disappointed. Mr. Niles, not every woman wants marriage. Well, do you? That's not important. The point is that women are more than beautiful vessels. They are intelligent. They have deep feelings. They want to achieve things. I am truly frustrated with this boring notion that a woman must marry and have children to be useful. Have you no imagination? Women are much more than that. Yes, but the girls who read your book will expect them. Don't worry, I won't disappoint your young readers. Although Jo turns down Laurie's proposal, later he proposes to her sister Amy and marries her. Oh, Jo's an independent woman like you. Yes, but then tragedy strikes when Jo's sister Beth dies of scarlet fever. Oh, it's tragic, perhaps too dark an event. No, it has to stay. It happened to my dear sister Lizzie. This book is in her memory. All right, I understand. But does Jo ever marry? Because no one will buy the book if she doesn't. I know you want that, so I will acquiesce. Jo marries a German man she meets in New York. Later, they start a school. The father comes home from the war at the end. Oh, a happy ending. Yes, in the book, but not always in real life. Agreed. One more thing, Mr. Niles, before we go any farther, I would like to discuss the contract. Of course, I assume you want the $1,000 up front. Well, that's a very generous offer, and it's hard to turn down, especially given my family's financial situation. Shall I write you a check? Let me think this through. If the book is successful, if I take a percentage, I could make a lot more. Bird in the hand, Miss Alcott. I know, but I can't get away from the feeling I should take a chance. Women's intuition? Perhaps. But after hospital sketches, I want to be wiser about financial matters. Call it women's intuition if you like. But I want 10% of the royalties and $500 up front. What? Not even Nathaniel Hawthorne could command that amount. I'll give you 200 up front and 5%, 308%. I'll give you 306%, and that's my final offer. Agreed. I use that, Miss Alcott. $1,000 could solve your financial problems for a long time. Mr. Niles, I have a feeling this book will solve our problems. Give me that contract. I'll sign it. My women's intuition was right. My book, Little Women, became a huge bestseller, and I became enormously wealthy. I bought my parents a new home, and they lived out the rest of their days in comfort, if not luxury. A short while later, Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Niles. I'm Bronson Alcott. I'm sure you know who I am. You're the father of Louisa May Alcott. Yes, I taught Louisa everything. She gets her writing talent from me. What can I do for you, Mr. Alcott? Well, as I said, I'm also a writer. I have a book. Oh. Yes, it's called Tablets. What's it about? Oh, it's really quite unique. Each chapter is the sign of the zodiac. I was thinking I'd let you publish it and then I would go on a lecture circuit. I'm really quite a dynamic speaker. I'm sorry, Mr. Alcott, there's no market for that kind of thing. But we could create one together. No, that's not how publishing works. Louisa has a very specific mark. You don't. Yes, I do. People who like the occult. I had a vision about it. I predict Tablets will sell 3,259 more copies than Little Women. Just give me a chance. I'm sorry, Mr. Alcott. You're creating bad karma. Right now, mark my words. Good day, Mr. Alcott. You'll be sorry. You'll regret it. You'll see. I'll prove it to you. And then a few months after that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of Hartford, Connecticut. I am Bronson Alcott, the father of Louisa May Alcott. As you know, she is the author of Little Women. My daughter learned everything from me. I'm also a writer. I'd love to tell you about my book, Tablets. It's based on the zodiac. Oh, the moon is passing through Jupiter tonight, which is an excellent astrological aspect. Who here knows their astrological sign? Nobody. Oh, that's odd. Would anyone like me to do that chart? It will give you excellent insight into the future. For a small fee, I couldn't. No? Well then, without further ado, I present to you my daughter, the author of the acclaimed book, Little Women, Louisa May Alcott. Thank you, Father, and thank you all for coming tonight. I shall begin by reading an excerpt from my book, Little Women. Christmas won't be Christmas without any presents, grumbled Joe.